Okay. Fear. You can take it one of two ways. Fear stands for face everything and rise. Or it stands for forget everything and run. Okay? You were in every major naval battle in the Pacific in World War II.
Well, not everyone.
Not everyone, okay. Well, more than any of us. Okay? And you were there for the big ones. Okay? Were you afraid?
I was too young and too dumb to be afraid.
Okay? For those of you who didn't hear that, he said, I was too young and too dumb to be afraid. And honestly, isn't that right? I mean, when we're young, oh yeah, you know, we can do things. It's like when my girls were growing up and they got to a certain age and I said, girls, boys are stupid, but we're going to tell you we're going to be stupid. Anytime a young man or even an adult man says, hey, watch this, something stupid is about to occur. Okay, because we think we're invulnerable, all right? And that is part of that youth of thinking, okay, we can do these things, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But the question I have for us is, can we not have that same attitude even when we're adults? Not doing stupid things, okay? But having the fear that no matter what happens, I'm okay. Because some of this can come from when we're youthful, and we don't know any better. And some of this can come when we're older, and we do know better. We've been there, we've done that, and we know that God will take care of us regardless. The outcomes are the same. We shouldn't be fearful. As a youth, it may be because we're young and don't know any better. And as an adult, it should be because we're older and we do know better. But we are called for one thing specific. Matthew 26. Okay, by the way, before we get into this, I wanted to just mention something. A couple weeks ago, we had a lesson on, complaining and lamentations, and Jamie did a great job, and I was laughing because Gretchen, my wife, afterwards said, man, that was just brilliant, just insightful. I really get it, and that just really meant something to me, and I looked at her and I'm like, I've been saying the same things for 35 years, and Jamie says it once and it's like, oh, this brings me, I'm like, and I told Jamie, I said, can you just live with us for a week or so? Because apparently how you say it matters, So he did a great job, and I'm not trying to repeat any of that. I just want to bring up something in terms of us. It's the end of the year. We are not the young marrieds class anymore, and so our perspective is different, and how do we look at this? If you remember several years ago, well, I guess more than several, there was a billboard campaign across the country, and it was just black and white lettering on billboards, and it said, what part of thou shalt not did you not understand? God. Okay? Remember that? Okay, so, and saw traditional Christians, everyone was like, yeah, great one. Okay, so I'd just like to point out that as traditional Christians, we tend to have no problems with that. Thou shalt not. Yeah, okay? But there are some things that God just states, not as thou shalt, but you will. But we tend to make excuses for all those. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Okay, that one, we're like, okay, yeah, greed. Those greedy billionaires. Oh, yeah, that's immediately what we say. They have the greed. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry. Let me put that in a different English vernacular, and the English teachers can tell me if this wording is incorrect from what we just read. Thou shalt not worry. No, we don't like it so much. Do not worry about your life. Don't worry about what you will eat or drink, about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or stow away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they are? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Well, I would argue that in American society, even in Christian American society, We definitely believe that's true. And I say that because we may not officially believe it's true, but I'm judging by actions. We do what we think will give us the outcome we want. And so we worry. And we are anxious. And why do you worry about your clothes? I've been telling my youngest daughter this since she was 6. Okay? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. I don't know if y'all noticed driving in today to church, the leaves are actually changing. And as someone not from Texas, I mean, it's actually changing a bit. And I'm not used to that because usually they just fall off the trees and they're done. And so coming from Alabama and the like, I've been missing that. And this was nice. I enjoyed the drive-in today. I'm like, how about that colors? What a concept. Now, y'all may be thinking, what's the problem? But you just don't understand. You know, go to East Tennessee and the like, and it's just, God took a oil painting and just went nuts. The colors are so bright. So it was nice today. And it is this. God clothes them in their splendor. If this is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much will he not more clothe you, you of little faith? So thou shalt not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? And from the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Now, when you were young and fighting in the war, it was perfectly legitimate for young people fighting in the war to be going, where are we going to be going to next? Okay? And at that time period, we'd finished the war in Europe, and we're looking to have to actually do landings on the main islands of Japan. And that was going to be bloody. And that was going to be vicious. And it was going to be hand-to-hand combat. And so soldiers were concerned, where are we being stationed? Where are we going? That's understandable. Okay? And yet, they still did their job. As John Wayne said, fear is not the absence of courage. It's being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Okay? And y'all did that. We are older. We're more seasoned. Okay? And so the things we are concerned about are different. So I don't know what you've spent time thinking about this past year. Is Social Security going to go up or down? Do I have enough money for retirement? Do I have enough money to pay my health care bills? What am I going to do about these health issues? What about these issues with my children or my grandchildren? These are normal human things. Okay? Normal human things. And yet, that brings up the questions, how do we want to die? Because that's the biggest fear, right? Those young men in World War I were going, I don't want to die, but I got a job to do and I'll do it. We are closer to death than we are to birth. And so it's legitimate to think on these things. And what are we going to do? I'm going to show you the little video I came across, but it's one of those memes where it's talking about the difference between men and women. And the meme was, you know, women, how do you want to die? I want to die peacefully in my bed surrounded by my family. Men, how do you want to die? And there's this clip of one guy charging an entire army, you know, beating off all these guys and then dying a painful death, but against incredible odds, you know, going down fighting and doing something glorious. And it goes back to when we were young boys and going, hey, watch this, you know, going through. The question I want to point is not male versus female, but Christians versus non-Christians. Because that's what that bit in Matthew is saying. The pagans worry about this stuff. You shouldn't. So when we think about death, which is, bills, everything else, are going to be gone. Are you worried about your inbox? The only time it's not going to be full is after you're dead. Okay? Are you worried about your bill? When my father died, We still got bills. And my sister called me one day and said, we got a tax bill from the IRS. What should I do? I said, ignore it. She goes, what? I said, what are they going to do? Put Dad in jail? It's like, what? It said, how much was it for? $24? Yeah, let's not even worry about this. Okay? But the catch is, none of those things matter anymore. So how are we approaching this? I said, some of you may already be retired. If so, great. Others not. Do you like your senior discounts? Captain D's. Man, I love those Sunday senior discounts. Girls were here a couple weeks ago and said, we're going to Captain D's. Why? Because they offer senior discounts. Really, Dad? That's right. Yes, I like my senior discount. Okay? We should view things differently as Christians. James 4:14. What do you know about tomorrow? How can you be so sure about your life? It is nothing more than mist that appears for only a little while before it disappears. Are you enjoying today after 40 days in the hospital? Lends a different perspective, doesn't it? After hospital food, Captain D's sounds like a feast, doesn't it? Okay? Not every day. I didn't say I go there every day, okay? But think about it. Warren Buffett is one of the richest men in the world. Do you know what he has for breakfast every morning? A McDonald's breakfast value meal. Because he's like, it's quick, it's fast, it's cheap. Okay? The gentleman has billions, but that's it. Excuse me? That's why he has billions. When I was a PhD student, there was a guy interviewing him, and they said, you're a billionaire and all this. Come on. He lives in the same house he bought in Nebraska, in the 50s. And he flies coach, all that, and they're going, there's got to be something that you spend money on. And he goes, well, I did buy something stupid last month. And the reporter's just on him. What? So he's thinking, what'd you buy? Australia? What is this? And Buffett goes, well, I bought a 40-inch TV. And the guy like this, you did what? I bought this 40-inch high-definition TV. I didn't really need it. And the guy's going, you can buy television companies. What is this? But Buffett, yeah, that's why he's rich. He's like, 40-inch, I splurged. I shouldn't have done that. The catch is, this entire earth belongs to our daddy. Were you ever in a store and you saw a young kid, taking some candy? No? I mean, yeah, kids, they'll start grabbing things. And, when you had children and you were checking out, and you're suddenly going, wait, I didn't put this in the buggy. What did this? Because they're like, hey, I want this. I'm going to stick this in there. Jeff Walling tells a story about when he was at a store and he saw this, 9-year-old picking up candy. He's like, kid, you can't take that. That's stealing. He's like, no. I can tell you. He said, no, you can't. That's stealing. And if you don't put it back, I'm going to take you up front. He says, go ahead. And instead of just hack Walling off. So he took the kid and he took him up to the front. And there was a lady, with the cash register taking payment. And he says, I found this young man, and he was taking candy, and he just smiles at her, and she just smiles back at him. And he's like, what is wrong with you, lady? He was stealing. And he looked at Jeff Walling and he said, it's okay. And the woman said, it's okay. And he's like, you people are nuts. Where's the manager? And the manager walks up and he says, excuse me, I found this young man stealing the stuff. And the kid just looks at the manager and smiles, and the manager looks at him and smiles. And Jeff Walling's like, these people have gone absolutely insane. What is it? And the boy looks up at Jeff Walling and says, those are my parents. Dad owns the store. And Walling goes, oh. But he pointed out this. That kid was blissfully confident in his life, right? Because he's like, my dad owns the store. All this food is mine. Okay? And he said, how much more confident as Christians should we be because our dad owns the store? But do we act like that little kid? Are we that confident? Or do we worry? Psalms 90 tells us to teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Genesis 5. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. And after Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. And altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. By the way, whatever problems and worries you have about family getting together at the holidays and how many people are getting together, you got nothing on Adam. Okay? When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. And he became the father of Enosh. Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters, and he lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. And then Enosh, and again, and you'll notice there is a pattern. Okay? They lived, they had kids, they died. End of story. Is that how you want your story to end? And in between, they yelled at the kids to stay off their lawn. Okay? Or to slow down. Or fill in the blank. Or, Acts 13:36, and when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. Which one do you want on your epitaph? Now, please notice, we can go into detail here. Did David screw up royally as king? Absolutely. You know? Reminds me of those football coaches I had. Go big or go home. You know, and David did. Okay? He made huge mistakes. But he also did great things as well. And he kept going. And we should do the same. 2 Timothy 1 and verse 7. For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So why do we fear? There's lots of reasons. And before I go into this, I just want to set aside something here. I understand depression and anxiety disorders are real. Okay? And we have therapies and we have medicines for that. And if you deal with that, you definitely should take advantage of that. All right? And what I'm about to get into now is not saying that if you suffer from depression or anxiety to browbeat you or to make you feel guilty and to make you sit there going, oh, you're just not a good Christian. That is not what I'm about to say coming here. I'm talking about why we keep doing habits that we know are bad. We all know it. Okay? We know we probably shouldn't eat as much as we do, but why do we do it? Because we like to eat. Okay? I shouldn't watch as much TV as I do, but why do I do it? Because I like to. Okay? You can give whatever excuses you want going through. So I'd just like to ask you to consider the following. Are you anxious because for even the reasons that it does bother you, you still like it? Let me give you an example. Are you anxious because it gives you a sense of control? If I make myself miserable, God will see how miserable I am, and He won't let this bad thing happen because God said He won't let me deal with anything more than I can handle. So if I really make myself anxious and miserable, God won't let this thing happen, which I really don't want to happen, because that'd do it. And in essence, you're just really trying to control God. And if you're looking at me like going, no, people don't do that. Oh, yes, they do. Jesus, is it okay, as was pointed out in the lesson a couple weeks ago, there's a difference between worry and lamentations. There's a difference between complaining and lamentations. Jesus in the garden did not say, Lord, I don't want to do this. I don't deserve to die. I've done everything right. These people are just hard-headed. They just won't listen. They don't deserve what I'm offering. So God, I don't want you to have me killed. Is that what he prayed? Or did he pray, I really don't want to go through with this, but not my will, but yours be done. Why do people complain and are anxious? Well, I've heard this one before. I have the right to my emotions. We're Americans, right? We have the right to our emotions. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. Again, that's not what Jesus said. God, I have the right to my emotions. No, he said, God, I don't want this to happen, but your will, not mine, be done. I'm not complaining. I'm just stating facts. No, you're complaining. And why? Because we're Americans. And we like to complain. Let me just ask you the following. Over the past couple weeks, have you in your discussions with anybody complained about, oh, I don't know, prices are going up. Inflation is a pain. Politician X, fill in whatever blank you want. Politicians Y. You know, I can't believe they're doing this, they're doing that, blah, blah, blah. Children these days, okay? Fill in the blank. Whatever social media feeds you're getting, ask yourself, because these feeds are adaptive, are they sending you more positive things or negative things? If you're getting more negative things, that's because, whether you realize it or not, the negative stuff that's coming on, you've spent more time glancing at it than you did on the positive ones. Which tells you what you're more interested in or what catches your attention. And you can't, I hate to break this to you, you can't lie to the AI. It's just taking what you did and giving you more of it. Okay? So you can rationalize things to yourself, but the AI is going, this is what you like, whether you want to believe it or not. And so ask yourself, is that what you should be focusing on? Why don't instead we think about going big in our final years? As a college student at Tennessee Tech, the Christian Student Center, there was a group of people sitting in front of the big screen television. That was back in the days when that was a big deal, but it was expensive and you only had one on campus. And somebody said, we ought to get all the Christian student centers together in the country. And we were young and stupid. So we didn't know we couldn't do that, so we did it. And it's still going on. Winterfest. That was a youth rally that was held by the Christian Student Center in Cookeville, Tennessee. And I was in charge of it, but I ended up in the hospital. And so the youth minister there said, I'll take it over, run through this. And his name was Dudley Chansey. It is the Winterfest that is now nationwide, and in January will be at the Arlington Municipal over here, that they have it every year. These are the biggest youth rallies in the country. Honduras Coffee Plantation. Gentleman I know was working with the Gitchagape, the preacher's college down there, and he noticed that, hey, these people, these Christians we're teaching, they need jobs. What can we do around here? I know, I'll start a coffee plantation. Now you need to know something about this individual. He's never had a cup of coffee in his life. We can pray for him later. But yes, he's never had coffee before in his life. So what did he know about coffee? I don't know anything. But I know these people need some jobs, so I'll start a coffee plantation. And I get my coffee from that coffee plantation. Toys for Unwed Mothers. Congregation I went to in Chattanooga when I was younger, the retired men there liked to woodwork. And so they would build wooden cribs and rocking chairs and all this. And they went to the local hospitals and they said, when you get an unwed mother in here who's giving birth, let us know. And they would show up and basically have a nursery built and give to them and said, let us know what else you can do. One Nation Under God, Mr. Stork. Okay. Cookeville, Tennessee is in Tennessee. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. It's where I went to undergraduate, and there are several churches of Christ there. There's the big one where all the wealthy people go. That's Jefferson. There's the next bigger one. That's right behind Tennessee Tech where all the educated people go, all the professors. That's College Side. And then there's the blue-collar one, the one without a lot of money, the one without a lot of education. But in the 90s said, God said, go out and preach the gospel and reach everybody. He said it, so we should do it. So we will trust that he can do it, so let's do it. And they did. The One Nation Under God campaign. And Mr. Stork was the one who ran the mailings for him. They reached every family in the United States with gospel materials. How many did y'all mail out? By the smallest congregation in one of the smallest towns in one of the smaller states. Because they just said, God said it. I believe it. let's do it. What do we offer as older, more refined, more, like a fine wine, people? Perspective and wisdom that comes from age. We have lived long enough to go back and look and say, all those things that we were anxious and worried about, what percentage of them actually happened? What did we actually have control over? Why in the world did we waste our time doing this? Okay? Why did God send the Magi to Jesus? Right? It's Christmas. Talk about the Magi later, but the Magi, they travel all the way from Iran, a long distance, dangerous and the like, but they're going to worship the Christ. Here's Joseph. Did you ever stop and think about this a minute? Let's turn this around. Here's Joseph. The woman he's going to marry ends up pregnant. She tells him, I didn't sleep with anybody. And he's going, uh-huh. We're not supposed to lie to one another if we're going to get married. But then an angel appears and said, she's telling the truth. Okay? And by the way, you're going to raise the Son of God. No pressure. Okay? All right. And now I've got to go to my homeland and deal with the taxes. Not dealing with our taxes and turning it in. We've got to go there. And I've got a wife who's 8 months pregnant. And how am I going to get her there? She's going to ride on a donkey. Ladies, I remember when Gretchen was pregnant and getting her in a car with heated seats. It was just like, oh. So she's traveling on a donkey. Okay? And then they get there and he has to find a place for her, right? And there's no room at the inn. Scripture doesn't record the conversation that occurred, but I'm just wondering. We're all married here, or most. So, can we conceive that perhaps Mary said, "You didn't plan very well, did you?" Okay. You mean to tell me that you didn't make a reservation? All this stuff. But we tend to forget the fact that it was a harsher world. Yesterday, I was up at campus at UTA grading tests, because for some reason, my students are all seniors and they want to graduate, okay? But I was the only person there. I was the only faculty member there. And I'm sitting in the lobby talking to a PhD student, and I saw this guy, and he kept walking around, and I said, can I help you? And he was a gentleman, ended up being 33 years old. Catch that, 33. He had gone for a semester at Baylor, but he was transferring to UTA because it was cheaper. He is from Sierra Leone. He had left his wife and 2-year-old child in Sierra Leone because there's no jobs and there's no money. And he came here. And because of the visa restrictions, he can't go back because he won't be able to get back here. And he had been accepted, and he'd had a friend drive up and drop him off so he could meet faculty and talk to administrators. And I'm like, nobody's here. And I'm going, have you eaten? He's like, no. So my PhD student and I took him to eat lunch, and his wife video chatted, which, I'm sure Mary's parents would have liked that. But, she video chatted and said, oh, thank you so much, and, take her this. And I'm like, do you have a place to stay? He's like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got to grade papers, but, here's my number. And I came out that evening, and I found him still in the lobby, and I'm going, you aren't thinking about, hiding out here and sleeping on the benches at night? He's like, well, is it okay, come on. And the Motel 6 was open, and put him in a hotel room. But it just struck me, he's 33, he's married, and he's got this young kid. Let's see how old Joseph would have been, and I'm going, okay. But just as a side point in terms of complaining, here's what I discussed at lunch. He'd never been out of Sierra Leone. How did he get to Baylor? He was looking online, and one of the pop-up ads came up, and in Sierra Leone, the name of the stream that goes through his village is Baylor. And so he's like, okay, I'll go here. And then he got to Baylor and realized this is a private school and very expensive. It's like, I can go elsewhere. Because he eats by going to a food pantry. His key questions for me are, where's the Goodwill store? Okay. And I asked him, so you've been here 3 months, what do you enjoy most? He goes, and this was a statement, the entire time I've been here, my electricity and my water has been on every day for 24 hours a day. That never happens back home. Just like you to think about that. Because I was asking what he was struggling with. He said, nothing, I'll make it work. I have electricity and water every day. And I've got to make this work because my family's depending on me. What do we complain about? I'm sure Joseph was worried. What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of my family? And the Magi appeared and they have these gifts. And suddenly he is warned in a vision, you can't keep your baby here. Get out and go to Egypt. Had Joseph ever been to Egypt? Scripture doesn't say, but I'm fairly confident as a statistician I can say no. Okay? He'd probably never been 30 miles past where he was born. And now he's got to take a family to another country. Like this gentleman that boarded a plane and landed on the other side of the planet and didn't know a person. And I'm sure he's going, what in the world am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And the Magi show up and it's like, oh, here's what I need to take care of my family next. God provides. He just didn't provide it in the way I was planning. A year ago today, we're talking about Russia and the war in Ukraine. What are we talking about today? Russia and the war in Ukraine. I could show you articles from a year ago today and said, well, I'll put this, Matthew 24:6. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. Any of the wars we're facing, all war is bad. But it's nothing compared to what was faced a generation ago. And we have that perspective. Middle ages arrive in your 20s. Stress is making young people feel older. Mounting job concerns. My undergraduates, my seniors, we were talking about this, and they said, back in the 40s and 50s, you could buy a house for 3 times the average salary in America. And we don't have that anymore. Why not? And I said, well, let's stop and take a look at that for a minute, shall we? In the 40s and 50s, the average size house in America was 800 square feet. It was 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. Do you think the average college student in America would live in that as an undergraduate dorm? Because many dorms in America are bigger than that. We want it to price the same. We just want it to be the average house of today, which is 2,200 square feet, which is, by the way, the biggest homes of anywhere on earth. Philippians 4:11 through 13. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, but I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And I can do this through Him who gives me strength. John 6:43, stop grumbling among yourselves. Numbers 21:5, and the people spoke against God and against Moses and said, why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread, there's no water, and we detest this food. Hi, you've just been a slave for 400 years, and I just got you out. And I'm already complaining. And by the way, if you go back to the Hebrew, it says they complain not against the Lord, Yahweh, but before and against God, Elohim. In other words, Israel not only rebelled against its personal deity, but against the very principle of divine authority. Guess what we do today in the modern world? You go and look at a lot of the arguments against God, and basically what it is, God isn't doing things the way I think they should be done. So why should I believe in Him? And we're saying, that's not how this works. God created us. He makes the rules, but that's not how we do it in America. I make the rules. Complaining is a moral issue. God miraculously provided food every day, but the people regarded it as miserable. I bet if God had quit providing food, suddenly they would have liked it. This is a pattern to complaining. It is habit forming, just like that AI knows and feeds you. And once you start complaining, you keep going. I raised cattle. I had a herd. It was a great herd. Never complained, was always happy. And then I got a new cow. And she was whining all the time. And guess what happened within a month? The entire herd was infected. So I took most of the herd to the sale barn, and they became steak. And I rebuilt the herd, and I learned. And now whenever I get a new animal, if it starts complaining, it becomes steak within 3 days. Because I'm like, I ain't putting up with this, okay? As grandparents, we can be morally demanding while the world is being less and social media is pushing everyone to complain. And I encourage you to bring back an oldie. Stop complaining or I will give you something to complain about. It's an oldie but a goodie, okay? Every Thanksgiving, we read something. My sister published this years ago. She wrote this, and I'd just like to share it with you. This is Thanksgiving on the Prater farm. And as I point out to my undergraduate students, I said, quit looking at your parents and saying, oh, I'm not going to have it as good as them. You were a teenager when you realized what your parents had. They'd already been busting it for 30 years. You weren't there at the beginning when we had nothing. Compare yourself to your grandparents and let them tell you how life was like. Here's the article my sister wrote. My father grew up near a rural Alabama town called Fayette. Born in the 1930s, he has often told me stories of life in a time and place when even the smallest boy's days revolved around picking cotton and feeding livestock. When I recently asked him about Thanksgiving and what they were like for his family, I had to coax him to uncover specific remembrances. No scenes of turkey dinners or formal family socials crowded his memory. Almost at the end of harvest season, November found his farming family with little more time for festive celebrations and even less money to fund them. But when Dad thought back to those autumn days of his childhood, he remembered that there was much to give thanks for. Holiday or not, a typical autumn day in 1943 still required the daily chores for my 10-year-old father, the oldest boy of what were then 4 siblings. Mornings were spent milking the cows and feeding the animals on the 100-acre farm. My father would draw the water from a well about 20 feet behind the house and bring it to the kitchen for my grandmother, along with any eggs she requested from the in-house. The night before, Dad and his father had chopped pine to kindle the wood stove, plus enough wood to fill the box for the next morning's fire. Give me 2 minutes. The stove and 2 fireplaces were the only sources of heat in the farmhouse, whose original 25-foot square cabin was built during the Civil War. Now a sitting room with fireplace and bed, the cabin had been expanded with the addition of a kitchen, a hallway, and 2 bedrooms. Plenty of living space for a family with 6 children and a wealth of relatives. A look at a modern-day Fayette phone book of 4,000 people in the big city would prove just how many of these Prater relatives have called the town home. Dad always had extended family within visiting range, some of which gathered at his family's farmhouse for Thanksgiving 1943 and a taste of grandmother's famous biscuits. Preparations for an autumn feast farm style were well underway. Grandmother was busy cooking for 4 to 5 adults and 8 or 9 children, her well-practiced hands turning effortlessly from sifting the flour for her biscuits to plucking a hen she had selected from the chicken yard that morning, all the while caring for 4 young children. Although she had only store-bought items in her pantry were salt and pepper and a bit of war ration sugar, farm food was plentiful that year. Grandmother chose the year's best from the several hundred quarts of canned goods that she put up every summer. My father still remembers the winter night in 1939 when his cold family huddled in an earlier farmhouse and listened with horror as every jar of grandmother's home canned vegetables burst open in the 14 below zero record temperatures, each exploding jar sounding like a shotgun firing in the thin, cold air. But this year, the hard-earned jars were safe, and they would be joined by country ham and sausage from the first slaughtered hog of the season. A few days before Thanksgiving, Granddaddy had fetched the cured ham from the smokehouse and put it in the kitchen's homemade sheet metal sink, along with beans and peas that he had shelled and soaked overnight. Dad had gathered potatoes from the root cellar for grandmother's sweet potato pie, which was now waiting in the warming closet above the stove, and the farm-grown peanuts were busy baking in my dad's favorite dessert, peanut butter cake. Such dishes were extravagant for wartime, with rations and shortages greatly affecting the dinner fare at city homes. Dad remembered the night that the local doctor came to help deliver Dad's baby sister. The doctor was beside himself at the chance to stay for a breakfast complete with bacon, eggs, ham, biscuits, and ribbon cane syrup, all luxuries to most city dwellers. But with memories of the Great Depression not too far from their minds, the country folk who sat around the table in 1943 were just as eager for their tastes, the result of a year of long days and hard labor. After every dish was sampled and every tummy filled, the family gathered by the fire in the sitting room. That year, much of the conversation drifted to news of the war. Uncle Laddie was serving the Air Force, and Aunt Lily's 4 boys were all in the Pacific. Even in the small rural community, the war was real, and Grandmother voiced her fears that Granddaddy would be the next one called to service. But even talk of war did not create a somber mood that holiday season, because they had a new blessing the family could enjoy together, electricity. Just a few months earlier, the Rural Electrification Act had finally reached the farming communities. My father still has the 6-inch fuse box that held two 15-amp fuses. You would appreciate this. Enough to power the house with 6 light bulbs and 1 wall plug. So that year, the after-dinner entertainment was music. Heard on a Motorola console radio that was my granddaddy's first purchase of anything electric, and which I have and got working this past year. The children crowded around the fireplace as grandmother made popcorn balls by heating homemade molasses over the flames and combining it with freshly popped popcorn. As the evening grew late, my father, his siblings, and his cousins would stand as close to the fire as they could before racing back to their unheated beds, the slowest child often ending sleeping sideways at the foot of the bed, relying on grandmother's hand-stitched quilts and heated bricks wrapped in old blankets to secure their toes from the chill. As my father described his memories of that 1943 Thanksgiving, I was amazed that in one lifetime he had seen such change. I also found myself grimacing at the sheer labor it took to provide for a family and run a farm without running water or modern conveniences. Yet my father's face did not show relief that the difficulties of those days were over. Instead, I noticed a prevalent smile in his voice, a smile that came from remembering a simpler time when a static-filled radio broadcast and a sweet potato pie were all that was needed to fill a family's heart with gratitude. This week, do not worry. God will take care of us. Take care.